The problem is when you say like, hey, one of your top 3 goals or top 3 tasks as like a lead pastor or something, or even just in a ministry director or something like that, is to develop and cast vision. When we say that, I think what happens in a room is that everybody hears that and they're sort of like, man, I don't really know exactly what that means, but I'm not going to be the one that shows that I don't really know what it means. Because I understand sort of developing a vision, like, man, having a dream and maybe doing the vision frame. I can read Mancini's book and figure that out. But the casting of the vision is sort of like, it is so philosophical sounding. It is so like, okay, how is that like my job? Like, I'm going to wake up today, I'm going to cast vision. You know what I mean? Like, that just doesn't. And so instead of casting vision, we just answer emails, because it's like, man, I know what that is. That's a concrete thing. I mean, I'm going to go to this meeting that anybody else in the world could do, but I need to fill some time. And so instead of casting vision, I'm doing other stuff. And so what I try to do and what I've tried to do is say, guys, casting vision is a real deliverable. You can actually do it. All it is having the foresight to see the environments that you have an opportunity to cast vision in and being ready for them.
This is Breaking Barriers, where we help pastors and churches grow so that they can go.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Breaking Barriers podcast. My name is Pastor Andrew, and I'm here today with Pastor Bobby. And we have an incredibly, I think, effective, exciting, really powerful, I think, topic today. And that is, we're going to talk about the power, the paradigm, and the practice of developing and casting vision. There may not be a more stronger, more effective tool in the life of a growing church than keeping a very vivid vision alive and fresh and before the people, right? Like, I mean, the Lord even tells us, where there's no vision, the people perish. I mean, there's something innate to humanity. There's something about following leadership that just clicks. It's sort of water to the thirsty kind of soul. Like, man, we're just built needing to see and have someone cast a vision, paint a picture of what the promised land is going to look like, for us in terms of a promised better future. And so, man, we have tried and really worked on that. I think one of the things that is good to note, Bob, for everybody that's here, is that I would say just by nature, I'm not the most natural visionary. And yet so that hopefully that gives hope to everybody, right? Mm-hmm. That these are things that you can work on, you can develop, you can create tools and paradigms. We're going to get into some of that today. You can become better at casting vision, and maybe nothing will move the needle more than becoming better at casting vision for your church, especially, it could work the same thing in business, a football team, whatever it is, but specifically talking about church and church growth and going. So vision, man, you can get better at it, and it's very important.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, let's dive into first, like, why you said the power of vision.
Power of vision.
Why vision is so important. And I think one of the reasons vision is really important because it just really taps into something with human beings being created in the image of God. I've thought about this before. Probably one of the big differences in like animals and human beings is like an animal doesn't think about tomorrow. Animal doesn't dream about what's going to happen 6 months from now or what's going to happen 12 months from now. That's something that's unique to human beings. I think being created in the image of God is that all humans, even people that are in the worst situations, they can think about a better future. They can imagine whether it's going to happen or not. There's something inside of us as humans that can imagine, man, 6 months from now or a year from now or man, 5 years from now, I could imagine X, and so because we have that in us, like casting vision, telling people, hey, in the future, this is what we're praying is going to happen, and this is what it's going to look like, this is what it's going to feel like. We're just tapping into something that's already there in people. And so we're not having to try to, create something in somebody, but there's just something in us as human beings. And, I think as people, some people get more engaged by vision than other people because we all are just wired differently, you know. But I know me personally, like when someone casts a vision to me, I get very easily like excited by that, you know, imagining what the future could be like. And so there's just a real kind of like power to that. I don't know what you'd want to add to that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this really goes back into some of that bucket. I think that we can fall into like, well, when a church gets larger, it becomes easier, right? So when a church is smaller, there's not enough room for vision. When the church gets bigger, there's a lot more room for casting vision and developing vision and that kind of thing. And I think what's actually probably going on is that when the church is smaller, because the vision is getting crowded out, it stays smaller. And as there can be more vision cast, then we have an opportunity to see people rally and buy in to the culture and the vision and what's happening. So, I mean, I know you and I probably have a million examples of this, but let's just think for a moment about, you know, the year is 2012 and we're trying to bump around, 30 people, barely any budget, trying to figure out, what our next step as a church is and all that. There are a lot of pitfalls, a lot of things that can take away from the vision, because I think when your church is smaller or when it's just beginning, sometimes it can feel like executing on a task really, really well is going to give you more bang for the buck, if that makes sense. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. I mean, but at the same time, and you do have to do some things like that, but at the same time, we would both say, but as the vision is developing and being cast, that's actually a lot more powerful. So how do we manage that? There's things that got to be done, but then there's a vision that we know is going to be the most powerful thing in terms of people rallying to your cause and to grow in the organization.
Yeah, I think it's definitely something to balance, because, I mean, like execution and tactics, it's like, in some ways, it's kind of everything, It's like, man, the day-to-day, how you execute on the mission, how you execute on the vision, like, it matters a lot, right? But on the other hand, like if a church doesn't have any vision, or they have a really small vision, then it's like, man, the vision is going to kind of be the box in which that church can kind of grow in. You know what I mean? If they have a really small vision, it's like, man, they're probably never going to grow beyond that vision. If they have a bigger vision, then they're probably going to be able to grow into that vision. And I know one of the things I think that really helped us when we started in 2012 is, we came from we were planted by a church that was much larger than we were. And so we did have a vision for, beyond where we were starting at, and we were able to envision that, maybe not where we're at now, but we were able to envision, a much larger church than just that launch team that we had. And, even though at the very beginning it felt all about, the tactics every weekend, setting up, all that stuff, I do think we were able to have a bigger vision to help people to see, hey, we're thankful for where we're at, but we are asking God and we're dreaming for a lot more than this. And for a lot of people, I think that's just really attractive to them. Like we all have difficult things we deal with in life, and we all want to hear like a compelling, positive vision about the future. It excites us.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're saying is right, because I remember, when we planted, it's like in my mind's eye, Mercy Hill was going to be on this trajectory, and I think now I look back sometimes and wonder how much of that mindset is what God used to take us where we have been now, and one way I think is a good illustration of that for me is I get asked every once in a while, just, man, am I just like so shocked at what God has done here, growing from 30 to 3,000 and church plants and all that kind of stuff. And I feel like it can sound a little bit, it could even sound a little bit arrogant. The answer that I have, it's the absolute opposite of arrogance in my opinion. But sometimes I'm like, no, man, this is what we came to do. Like in my mind, like this is kind of what we were coming here to do. We were going to try to plant a church that grew really big and sent people all over the place, Now God could have not done it for sure. And I mean, a lot of people can have a vision and not happen, but I do think in our story, some of the power of the vision was, man, this was sort of always what we were hoping. And now that we've kind of hit some milestones and stuff, it's like now the lid has been lifted even more. You know, I almost don't even want to say out loud what I'm praying and think God could do here. And if it happens, some of that might be because we were dreaming it, you know. A lot of, you know, we do a lot of, we read self-help stuff and leadership stuff all the time, and we're kind of into that, me and you are. But, you know, there is something to this concept of, man, if you can, if you don't believe it can happen, it won't. You know, it's like we know that. Like a lot of the books are about, you know, vision, and it's almost like they're tapping into something that is very Christian. Because what you have in the Bible is God constantly casting a vision for the people of what it's going to be like when they come into the land, or when we come into the kingdom, or, you know, whatever. It's like there's always this big vision, and you know, it's always about, remember where I've taken you from. And it just seems like in the economy of God's kingdom, there's a big connection between what you're dreaming and what you're believing God for and where you end up. You know, and it's almost like the world around us kind of has stumbled into that, not just recently, obviously the last 100 years, power, positive thinking and all this stuff. But, you know, for us, it's like Christianity has gotten this right a little bit all along. You know, do you ever feel that?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, the way I think about it is like one of the things I think that makes it really powerful is like at first you even think of like the early church or whatever, you say like Christianity's kind of gotten this right all along, you know, like, you know, you have one person or a group of people that are trying to lead another group of people, you know, trying to get them to catch the vision. This is where we're going. This is what the mission is. And I think the real power in vision, you think back to early Mercy Hill, like in our launch team and stuff, it's like at the beginning, we're trying to get people to catch the vision. And we're trying to lead them in the vision. When vision becomes extremely powerful is when people do catch the vision, they internalize the vision. Now they're out doing the vision, doing the mission, and you don't have to give them instructions. You don't have to tell them what to do. They're taking ownership themselves, right? And they're out there being like carriers of the vision. That's when vision becomes like crazy powerful. Like I give you just like one example of this. You know, over the last 2 years, we've been in a discipleship initiative called Deeper. And one of the things we did is we printed T-shirts, you know, that just say Deeper. And it's funny, like I've been out in the community at times, and Mercy Hill's the size now where I'll see somebody wearing a Deeper shirt, and I'm like, I don't know who that person is. You know, they obviously go to Mercy Hill. They go to one of our campuses. I've never met them. But how cool is it that they've internalized that vision of where we're going. They've internalized what Deeper is all about. And now they're out like wearing the T-shirt, you know, and they're pushing that vision forward. That's when vision becomes really powerful, when you have all these people that like you can't even, it's like the early church, you know, once people started going and taking the gospel, like you couldn't trace the movement of the gospel if you wanted to, because people were out carrying the vision. Yeah,
I remember during Easter time, this past Easter was very similar. You know, it's like we would drive around anywhere in the Triad and you would just see like sign after sign, He is risen, in people's yard. You have no idea who they are. You don't know, you know, like you're saying, I've probably never met the person, or, you know, maybe they've never even met our lead team or anything like that, but they've become ambassadors of what we think God is going to do. So we understand there is such power in vision and casting vision. All right, so I think a lot of people might go with us on that. Sometimes I do think sometimes this is a real place where the cynic sort of rises up, because they just want to sever the idea of mentality and mindset from results, which I think is pretty crazy, because you know, there's just so much anecdotal evidence of what happens when you lift the lid on your own thinking. And we could just talk about this for just days, about how many examples we have. But sometimes the cynic kind of comes out. There's no power in vision. Okay, assuming you're not there, though, and you're like, yeah, I get that. Like, I understand there's power in it, but what does it mean? What is vision? You know, how do you develop a vision? How do you cast a vision? I know we've done other podcasts on this, but I think now we should move from power vision into the paradigm we use for developing and casting vision. And so I'll start by just saying, for us, I do think we need to acknowledge that the word vision itself sometimes can get a little murky in Christian circles, because you got people in the Bible that have literal visions from God. That's not really what we're talking about. What we're talking about when we say casting a vision is taking a direction that God is clear about in His Word, and maybe, I would say leading us in, or the success of what we're trying to do is leading us in that way. And then grabbing a fixed point in the future to kind of anchor around and build out what it's going to look like. That would be what we would say is vision, creating an anchor point out in the future that you can paint the picture of what it's going to be like, and trying to bring that into the present. Grab the future and bring it into the present.
Right.
And then just kind of talking about, and being very clear, like, this is not magic. I can't just say, like, one of the vision pieces we have, and we've had for the last 5 years, is that we want to have 200 families raise up from Mercy Hill to either adopt or foster by 2025. We cast that vision in 2020. I can't make that happen. Like, it's not a magic trick that I say, hey, we're going to see this happen. But there is just such power in painting that picture, making a fixed anchor point, pulling it from the future into the now. All of that is so helpful in our people being able to catch where it is that we're going. This is not a vision that God whispered in my heart or my ear sometimes. It could be that, but it doesn't have to be that. We have other goals and plans and things like that we're casting vision for, that they're in line and direction with where we think God is taking us. It's up to us as good leaders to grab that, pull it into the now. And that's what we mean when we start talking about vision.
Yeah, I would say in terms of like the paradigm of vision, like, to me, it's a real vision that you have when you begin to make plans towards the vision, Because if you don't make plans towards the vision, then it's kind of just like a wish, right? Or it's kind of just like a hope, or it's this pithy thing that you just kind of throw out there. So at Mercy Hill, like, not only do we try to cast a vision for 10 years from now, what we want to see happen 10 years from now, but I think it just kind of shows you actually believe it, or you're believing God for it, that you begin to make plans towards that vision, because you're talking about like pulling it from the future into the now, because one of the ways I think about it, and, we have different tools that we use for this, but like, hey, if we were going to see X amount of baptisms in the future, or X amount of people sent out, and that's really what our vision is, 5,500. Like, what are we going to have over the next couple of years? What are we going to have this year? What are we going to have over the next 5 years? And then begin to actually make real plans around those things, like put staffing energy towards those things, put money towards those things, actually create a 90-day plan towards those things. So, we've used Vision Frame in the past. We've used more recently some of the EOS tools, all the different tools around this stuff. And there's honestly an infinite amount of stuff out there. There's so many good books on this stuff around planning for your strategic planning for your vision. All the tools are trying to get you to do is take what's in the future, take what you're hoping to see happen, and begin to create plans over the shorter period of time, and focus your attention so that you're not doing 100 things, but you're doing some of the more important things, and you're kind of holding yourself and you're holding the organization accountable to say, hey, if this vision has any chance of happening, we need to do some of these things in the kind of near future, and you begin to kind of put plans to paper. I'll let you add whatever you want. I'll give one quick example though, because this is just helpful for me. I remember a number of years ago just trying to think about like this concept of vision, and different companies got vision and all this stuff, and I looked at Amazon, the company Amazon. I think their vision was something to the tune of like being the most customer-centric company in the world, I think was their vision. I was like, that's kind of, that's just a weird, like that's how they were planning on like changing the world, that they were going to be the most customer-centric. And I'm like, okay, how does that actually play out? And I remember I bought a backup camera for my truck. This was probably 4 years ago from Amazon. And when I was putting it together, I broke it, and I was just like, oh my goodness, where did this thing get shipped from? How am I ever going to be able to get replacement parts? Like, somewhere on the other side of the world or whatever, and on the back of the box, it was a Sunday. On the back of the box there was a number, and I called the number, it's Amazon, and somebody answered immediately on a Sunday in the afternoon. And I thought, there's no way I'm going to get anybody to even answer this, And within about 60 seconds, they said, hey, don't worry about it. We're going to mail you more parts. It'll be there tomorrow. And it was just like, in that moment, I was like, oh my goodness, like you could kind of feel that they had done probably a million different things over the last 10 years to actually try to become the most customer-centric. And that's what it looks like, actually making plans towards that vision.
Yeah. So I think, for us, maybe going through our vision frame might be a good, just good for everybody to kind of get a bit of an example, in their minds. So, we have a 10-year vision of seeing 5,000 people baptized and 500 people sent out as a missionary from Mercy Hill, 2 years or more, unless we're talking about a gap year, which we count that as well. So that, there is an origin story of how we came up with that. We don't have to go way into that now. First, we talked about 500 people gathered at 5 years. That was our very first kind of attempt at a big vision. Then 500 baptisms at 5 years, and then God blew that out of the water. And now it's moved into 5,000 baptisms, 500 sent ones. Obviously, we see a great connection. You're not going to get to 500 missionaries without seeing 5,000 people baptized and reached for the gospel. And so that's the top. Now, like you said, you can use traction. You can use different paradigms that people have. They're all trying to get you to do the same thing. Think about that fixed point in the future that you're trying to bring into the now. And then you got to ask the question, what would have needed to happen, right? And I know you guys have done some podcasts even on reverse engineering your goals and stuff like that. But I mean, for us, to me, the easiest way to think about it is thinking about vision frame. And I do a vision frame for just about every area of my life now because it's so simple and it's a good paradigm once you have it. And it starts by setting that mountain beyond the mountain, what is it going to be like, qualitative and quantitative, like imagining what it's going to be like and putting some language around it that's really sticky. So for us, it's the 2030, vision. 2032, I think, is the number. And we say, hey, we want to see 5,000 baptisms, 500 sent ones by then. Then we come back it down and we say, all right, well, what do we need to see in the next 3 years, right? And we're actually in the process of resetting these things now because we set these goals, and I'm about to say we set them 3 years ago. And by God's grace, we've seen pretty much all of them hit, and that's going to be really effective for us to hit our main goal. If we do hit our 5,500, it's going to be because we effectively hit these 3-year kind of bites all the way to that. So those 3-year bites were to move into a new home and hub, which is being built right now. We needed to do a financial generosity discipleship initiative, $30 million over 25 months. We're on track for that, pretty close to being on track for that. We felt like we needed to have culture around our campuses, really tightened kind of how we're thinking about that and how we're going to do that. And
the fourth is we really felt like we needed to really crystallize the vision of the church.
Right.
Because the larger you get, the more chance you have people going in a lot of different directions. And if you get people to really capture, man, this is where we're going, there's a lot of power in being a larger church because you got more people out there that are vision carriers. And so you did a lot of work around, that's really where the 5,000 was kind of born out of that, really trying to crystallize, hey, what exactly is Mercy Hill? What's the dent we hope to make in lostness in the kingdom? Like what's God having for us specifically?
And clarifying our culture. We could do a whole nother podcast on this, but churches don't want to believe that they have a brand, but they do. We all do, man. There's different ones, and we had to clarify, what are we and who are we? And that means saying no to some things, saying yes to some things. All right, so we have the 10-year goal, if you want to say that, the next 3 years. And then it goes down to the 1 year. And I'll let you talk about this. You've been really instrumental in this. Yes, I'm trying to dream for that and thinking about it. And I feel like it is my role. You help me with this a lot, but to sort of set what that is for us. But then once we have set it, it becomes a lot of your job during the year to go after that thing with our executive team and to try to help actually make it happen. And so this year, our 1 year goal is to see 5,000 first time guests come through our different events and come through our church. So, man, talk about that for just a minute. I know that's not the point, but what does it look like to take that 1 year and say, all right, now this is a big part of my job?
Right. Yeah. If you don't have something like that, most people, just with the way that we're wired, we end up just kind of getting pulled into just kind of the whirlwind, which is your kind of repetitive tasks and stuff that you need to do every week. Your, preaching and meetings and, elder meetings and just pastoral stuff and counseling. And so the idea of trying to say, okay, it's not everything we're going to do, but the focus for this year is going to be this thing here, because we feel like for those 4 things that we're trying to go after over the next 3 or so years, this thing right here has to happen. Mm-hmm. Like, it has to get lined up. We've done goals around baptisms. We've done goals, like you said, this year around first-time guests. And it's not just about like, hey, let's try to get a lot of first-time guests, but it's hopefully creating like processes and plans and stuff that are going to kind of last into the future. I remember post-COVID, we had a goal of in a particular year, and this one's a little bit more nebulous, but it's like we really wanted to kind of recreate this culture of like white hot worship, because, and everybody in churches feel this now. You still have people coming back to church that ain't been in 3 years, or they've never come back after COVID. And so we realized real quickly, like, hey, these different goals that we have, we got to be gathering on the weekends. This is biblical. It's been happening for 2,000 years. We got to work on recreating that culture this year. Mm-hmm. And so the 1 year stuff is just kind of an emphasis on, hey, for one of these things to happen 3 years from now, we got to put some focus on this thing this year.
Yeah. And so, we think about 10-year, 3-year, 1 year, and then we break the year down into basically 12 kind of rocks, right? Like every quarter has 4 that are 90 days. Mm-hmm. So kind of a 90-day, man, we want to do these 4 things over the next 90 days. I'm not going to go into what all those are because there's a million of them, but like this quarter, for example, we're getting ready for the Ridge to launch, which is our new broadcast facility, home and hub. And so there's a launch team being gathered for that. And, building that launch team is one of the big, different things about that are some of the big rocks for this quarter. And those are more tactical things. But I do think it's very important. I threw this out there, and this might be a little cutting, I don't know. But I said to you before we got on here, I said, man, the paradigm part of this, I sometimes I wonder, just from my work with the state and being around other pastors, that if you had 100 pastors in a room, that potentially 90 of them have no paradigm for vision. Mm-hmm. And I hate that, because it's something that actually can be corrected with, man, pick up a book on vision frame, read the book Vivid Vision. I mean, there's a lot of ways that very simply we can begin to organize our own thoughts around vision, because I have met a few absolute, honest to God, born visionaries in my life. But I really mean that when I say I have met a few. All the other mere mortals like me and you, they got to learn how to do these things. And having, a paradigm for it, whether it's traction or vivid vision or, vision frame or whatever it is, man, it gives you a superpower as if you're one of those people that is a true, just out of the box alien visionary. And if you're not, and you're somebody like me, then you need all the tools and the helps you can get to get the vision out in front of people.
You're talking about just how to execute on it.
Well, I'm talking about even how to organize it, because I think a lot of people, because we're going to get into the practices in just a second of how you cast it. But I think that some people would just say, well, vision is just, you just have a vision. And it's like, nah, it really is not that simple. It's not overly complex either. But the vision part, it does have layers to it in terms of, man, where are we trying to get in the future, and then start backing that thing up into, man, what does that mean for the goals that we have over the next 90 days, 1 year, 3 years, or whatever it is. Even having that kind of organization to it and a commitment to it, I think is a bit like a superpower for somebody who's never operated with any kind of actual paradigm when it comes to how they set the vision for their organization or church.
Yeah, I think one place where people can miss it is like in the 4 disciplines of execution, the book, they talk about like lead measures and lag measures, Mm-hmm. lag measure is like what you're hoping to happen. It is kind of the vision, man. We're hoping to raise $1 million. That's just an example. That would be a lag measure. The lead measure is like, okay, what are you actually doing to try to make that thing happen? Because a lot of times what you'll hear from church planners and people in ministry, they'll kind of have the lag measures of like what they're trying to see happen. Like, we want to see this happen, or we want to see this happen. We want to plant churches, or we want to send missionaries, or whatever. But then you say like, okay, well, what are you doing? Like, what are you doing this week to hold yourself accountable to try to do some sort of input, to try to do some sort of lead measure that's going to, and a lot of times you realize like, well, they're not really doing anything. They're more just like saying, hey, we want this to happen, or whatever, and that's where these things get brought together, I think, is not only are you casting the vision, but you're saying like, man, there's a framework, there's a paradigm. Like it may not happen, but we certainly are activating on stuff that we feel like gives us the best shot of seeing this actually happen.
Right. It's good, man. Okay. So we've done power, we've done paradigm, and now I want to shift our last focus into practice. Okay. Just a quick way to set this up. I had a chance to do a bit of a teaching for some guys in the Houston Church Planning Network. And of all the things that we talked about over like an hour and a half, this is the one that they zeroed in on the most. And I think it's important because what many of us say in terms of church planner trainings, pastoral trainings, there's not a lot of disagreement. We've done some controversial stuff on this podcast. I don't think none of this stuff is. It's like, yeah, man, you need to have a vision. You need to cast a vision. Like, that's sort of church planning 101, right? The problem is when you say like, hey, one of your top 3 goals or top 3 tasks as like a lead pastor or something, or even just in a ministry director or something like that, is to develop and cast vision. When we say that, I think what happens in a room is that everybody hears that and they're sort of like, man, I don't really know exactly what that means, but I'm not going to be the one that shows that I don't really know what it means. Because I understand sort of developing a vision, like, man, having a dream and maybe doing the vision frame. I can read Mancini's book and figure that out. But the casting of the vision is sort of like, it is so philosophical sounding. It is so like, okay, how is that like my job? Like, I'm going to wake up today, I'm going to cast vision. You know what I mean? Like, that just doesn't. And so instead of casting vision, we just answer emails, because it's like, man, I know what that is. That's a concrete thing. I mean, I'm going to go to this meeting that anybody else in the world could do, but I need to fill some time. And so instead of casting vision, I'm doing other stuff. And so what I've tried to do is say, guys, casting vision is a real deliverable. You can actually do it. All it is having the foresight to see the environments that you have an opportunity to cast vision in and being ready for them. Now, what I'm about to go through here is a bunch of environments like this that most pastors do. The problem is many of us, these things just happen to us. It's like, man, I'm good on my feet 3 minutes before the thing. I give a thought and then, I go through the thing and that's it. And I've lost on 80% of the power of what it could have been. And so for us as pastors or even directors of ministries and stuff where you have a chance to cast vision for what you're trying to do, to me, there is a real trellis to it. It's like, man, you think about the 8 or 9 or 10 environments and where you have an opportunity to say out loud where we're going. Michael Fletcher told me this one time, good ones tell you what they're doing, great ones tell you where they're going. So I need those 8 or 9 or 10 environments where I get a chance to tell people, where are we going? What's it going to feel like when we get there? Can you imagine with me, And I think that once you have those things in your mind, they stop happening to you and you get a chance to sort of happen to them. Any thoughts on that before I dive into some of these things?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I just, a lot of times, like you said, pastors will, invest tons of energy on preaching and thinking about the sermon and stuff. But then when it comes to like casting vision, unlike a good CEO somewhere, they just don't even really think about it. But it's so powerful. And you actually, like you said, you already have the opportunities in front of you. Like, you already have those environments. You don't have to go create those environments. You just need to put a little bit of work on like, hey, where we're actually going.
Right.
And then investing that, because most pastors really have this skill set, investing that teaching gift, investing that preaching gift in, man, how do I conceptualize this for people so that people can can get the vision.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I think especially for a lead pastor, that's the role that I'm in. It's coming to each of these environments and doing the Andy Stanley thing. How can I do what only I can do here? And what only I can do sometimes is not even the Bible teaching part. It's the where are we going part and what's it going to feel like when we get there. So let me give you 8 or 9 environments here that I think every pastor should have in the back pocket. And these things should not happen to you, but we know when they're coming up and we know what we want to share. And we spend time investing in the communication that goes into these things. The first one, obviously, is the sermon, right? And I think that sometimes people might not view the sermon as the time of casting vision. We would disagree with that. We would say like, hey, this sermon is an incredible time to cast vision, not only of what God wants for your life, but what we feel like God is doing in the local body. So much so that we sort of have moved to the first 2 or 3 minutes of every sermon being a vision casting moment. So I constantly, and I just have a little thing in my head. I'm like, hey man, these first 2 or 3 minutes, I'm going to look through the rearview mirror for a minute, and then we're going to look through the windshield for a minute, and then we're going to move into the sermon. That doesn't mean that we don't also do things during the sermon, where we get a chance, we're talking about baptism or something like that, then why not tie it to the vision of 5,000? Or we're going to talk about giving, why not tie it into the vision of deeper and trying to constantly tie it into those things. But for somebody like me, a mere mortal who is not naturally gifted in this, and I really mean that. I was on a search committee for the executive director, treasurer for the state of North Carolina, and it was like, man, you had a stack of 100 resumes that were all unbelievable. I mean, awesome. Anybody could do a great job, but there was one guy in there that was just a unicorn when it comes to vision, and he's the guy now in North Carolina, Todd Unziker. And I remember just thinking, like, man, there's just a unicorn in that bunch because it's natural for him. And for most of us, it's not. So if it's not, then you got to have ways to do it. One of my ways to do it is I'm just going to make sure every sermon that I preach, the first 2 or 3 minutes is going to be something vision related. A second environment, and we've been doing this since the beginning, is that most times in churches, that are growing, there is some retreating element to the discipleship model, whether it's community group leader retreats, college retreat, student camp, whatever it is. A lot of times lead pastors invited to come or hey man, you're going to go for a day or you're going to do something or you're going to preach at one of the things or whatever it is. And, to me, that is an incredible time of having leaders in front of us. And, we would be remiss if we don't take that time to say, hey, I want to cast vision here for where we're going 10 years, the next 3 years. Look through the rearview mirror, look through the windshield. Another opportunity that we have to cast vision is in elder meetings. We have an elder meeting about once a month. We'll have an all-campus elder meeting maybe once a quarter or something like that, and trying to keep those guys, sort of on the same page about where we're going. I'll put the next 2 in here because you do a good job with this too, thinking about all staff and staff prayer. So those are not self-explanatory, but our all-staff meeting is once a month, the all-staff together, 2.5 hours. We'll do staff development, we'll do worship, we'll do that. And then when it comes my time, or whoever's the main speaker that day, it's going to be about vision. It's not just about equipping people to do a better job. It's about talking about our culture, who we are, and where we're going. Our staff prayer happens once a week on Wednesdays at 11 a.m., I try to always bring 10 or 15 or 20 minutes in for something vision related. If I'm not the one doing it, then I'll try to get whoever is doing it to do something that's make sure they tie it into the vision of the church. Now, these next 2 I wanted to bring you in, Bobby. The next 2 I have are quarterly giving letters and generosity environments. And I think these are really important environments that we try to foster at Mercy Hill. Again, I think that a guy could just say, oh yeah, it's a giving letter that goes out once a month. They could just write it in 2 seconds and not even think about connecting it to anything. Or you can spend an hour on it. You can get your assistant, or if you have a team member or volunteer, to bring you some stats from the different things and make it really good, compelling. Man, let's look at what God is doing. What do you think about those 2 areas? Quarterly giving letters and generosity meetings.
Yeah, vision and culture, like those things leak, and so constantly going back. And like you said, and one, some people don't do generosity letters, but in a generosity letter, you could just say, oh, man, look at this cool stuff that we saw happen. Man, awesome. We saw these things happen. Students went to student camp. people gave their life to Christ. But then you could take that next step and say, you guys know that, man, our vision is to see 5,000 and 500, and you invested in sending these students to student camp, and that is playing a huge role. These students are going to be sent out of Mercy Hill one day. I mean, these students we're seeing getting baptized, and you connect it for people, and it just does. When you do that, it does so many things. I mean, it inspires people. It creates a lot of leadership trust with the leaders of the church, because you've been casting this vision saying, this is what we're trying to do. And now, man, we're seeing the kind of first fruits of that. You guys are giving to that. And it's just constantly creating that culture, casting that vision. And it will build it in people to the point where people end up grabbing onto that vision as much as you believe it, know, and that's when it's like, man, this thing is like taking off like wildfire because people are just running with it.
Yeah. Last couple of environments here. 4 times a year, we do something called an all-leader gathering. So it's, people are, if they're leading in group, if they're leading on a serve team, if they're leading in kids, man, we invite them in. It's a worship night, plus some vision casting and teaching from me. Normally, it's very important. Like, for example, this one coming up, I'll be on a flight coming back, and we got to, make sure somebody's at the airport to pick me up in Charlotte and drive me fast and all that stuff so that we can be here, because I don't want to miss that time with our leaders in order to help cast vision for them about where we're going, about the ridge, about, man, what we're going to see next year. I mean, just all of it, and make sure that we're connecting these things to the longer term vision of 5,500. The last one, and we'll end on this environment, is the digital environment. That can be emails, it can be written communication in terms of blogs, that kind of stuff. It can also be social media. I didn't do social media for a long time. I don't particularly love the public nature of it or whatever. But it was funny to me because our communications team, of which you were over sort of at this time, they sort of kept talking to me about it, because they're saying, hey, we feel like we're missing an opportunity to connect and communicate vision with our folks because they're not able to hear your voice online. What do you think about that? Like, how important is the digital platform, the social media stuff, when it comes to connecting, our people to the heartbeat of the vision of the church?
Yeah, I think it's really important. I mean, the stuff is always changing, so there's not like any clear black and white, but like it's a very leveraged activity. You think about like even in the kind of the world outside of church, you think about like politics or business, like people that get their message across to the most amount of people, and they have the most amount of people heading in the same direction, typically see like the best results, and so, I mean, we live in a digital world, website, social media. People will probably even, go check out your website, go check out your sermons before they even come to church. And so, I mean, people are going to, most of us don't love social media necessarily, but it is a useful way to communicate in kind of big buckets to a lot of people. Mm-hmm. So I think it's important.
Yeah, I've found that, I think. I mean, we've even anecdotally been able to see some things. Like I'll think about Christmas, where we, and I don't just mean me, but our comms team is really leveraging my social media stuff. And it's not a huge footprint. I mean, right. The church's footprint's bigger than my footprint. But something about the personal nature of the layered voice on how I'm personally excited about what God's going to do. We had cast a big vision for Easter, wanted to see over Christmas, wanted to see over 6,000, all this kind of stuff. And something about that felt like it got into the bloodstream a little better than maybe it has before. And I can't help but think that some of it has to do with the personal voice of social media there. So, all right. Hey guys, power, paradigm, and practice. We're going to leave it at that. You can jump on our private Facebook page for content that is just like this. Man, we believe deeply at Mercy Hill that churches can grow without going, but they cannot go without growing. So if you are trying to grow your church so that it can go, man, this is the place for you. We'd love to connect further with you.